So what we're going to be covering today is opacity and masking. There's a lot that can be done with these two very simple effects to figure out how to make something completely different in your video. This week's going to be dedicated to masking. I'm going to expect you to mask some videos. So it's not as hard as it looks, right?
Bruh, are you still making another tutorial?
This
You know we've been
right
at
here.
this forever, right?
I know,
I'm
right?
over this.
Bro, chill out.
I'll just sit here and wait. You know we got things to do though.
That's right. You sit there and wait. It'll be alright. Okay, so let's start with what masks actually are. Masks are just cutting out chunks of video and keeping just that chunk. So it's allowing me to cut out this area while having something different running in the background. It's how you merge those layers to create a different type of look. You can do all kinds of things with them, and I'm expecting you to experiment with these in your future videos. Now, they can be frustrating. There's no denying it. There are times with masks that you'll be forced to go frame by frame, and there's nothing more annoying than that. But this is just a rudimentary breakdown. I want to show you just the basics of it. We'll go into further detail at a later date with it, okay? So you'll need to have downloaded your files and put them in your project panel. So I know my face is covering them, but you can see them here. Now, the files that we have here are of Dan sitting in a chair, and we've got some different videos of him kind of sitting here bleeding, looking sulky. Let's start with young Dan in a chair here. Okay, so drag that to your timeline, create your sequence. Now, inside of your effect controls, where your source panel usually is, you've got the options always for opacity, motion, and time remapping. We've played with motion. That's how we got things to move from one place to another. That's how we got things to flip and twirl. But opacity is probably the most complex of this lot, even though there's not a lot in here. So let's start with just the basics, okay? We've got young Dan in his chair on V1. I want to go up and I want to find Dan chair 04 and put that on top, okay? So these two layers are on top of each other. Have Dan chair selected. And where it says opacity, I want you to drop the opacity down some. So go to like 50 on it. And you'll see a fading between these two seats, these two shots. It's the exact same shot basically. It's lined up almost the exact same way. So they fade and blend into each other pretty well, right? So I'm going to shorten this clip. I'm going to cut off all this little extra that I don't need on the big Dan in chair. So I'll delete all that out. And between these two, I can use my keyframes to map this opacity. So I'm going to go just a little bit of the ways down. I'm going to click on this toggle animation. I'm going to go a little further down, and I'm going to drop my opacity down to 0. Creating these two keyframes creates a start and stop point for that motion, for that opacity. So when I hit play, you can see it fades from one to the next. It's a nice little thing. All right. Now let's go back to the beginning of this and let's look again. You've also got blending modes. These are the same blending modes you saw in Photoshop. There's very few that are different. So you've got your darkening areas, you've got your lightening areas, you've got your overlays, and then you've got some kind of crazy ones that'll play around with the color or the light. Okay? Try clicking through some of these and see what they do. Some of them will make things very dark. Some of them will give you a little ghost image of Big Dan on top of little there. You'll be able to color dodge out, add differences or seclusions, and I want you kind of to play around with it and come up with a different look. Pretty neat, right? So anytime you're stacking multiple videos on top of each other, this is the first place I go to kind of create some interest in those videos, okay? Now, I want you to be careful because in your project panel, you probably have two young Dan chairs. Pay attention to the symbols in the corners. Or if you're in list view, it's a little easier to see because you can see this icon. Let me get my face out of the way here. It's probably a little easier to see because you can see this green icon that is your sequence. We want the one that's purple. I want to drag that down just a little further down the stream. Okay? Put my face back where it belongs. Thank you. Alright, so I want you to have this icon set up. Now, the most complicated of the masking techniques is using your pen tool. It's just complicated. There's no real way to say it. If you're not familiar with the pen tool, this is going to be a bit of a challenge for you. Okay? I'm going to make my video a little larger so I can see it. Feel free to move yours as you would like. Alright, so I'm going to get my opacity. Make sure it's toggled down. I'm going to make sure I'm on the right clip. You saw I had the wrong clip there selected. Make sure you're on the right clip. And I'm going to hit this little pen tool one time. Now be careful. First time users won't see anything happen. They'll get confused. They'll hit things a few times. If you do this, you're going to end up with overlaying masks and just a big headache to what you're trying to do. So make sure you only have one mask here. Okay? So hit that pen tool. There's your mask. You're done. Make sure you have the word mask selected as you do this. Now, if you're new to Adobe in general, this might be a bit of a challenge. This pen tool works through clicks and drags. So I'm going to click here, hold my mouse, and drag. Now in Illustrator, you used to have the option to kind of click back on this anchor point to get rid of your handlebars. It doesn't work that way in video, so you're going to have to work with your handlebars, kind of moving it down. Notice I'm continually kind of pointing to the next location that I'm going to drag this to, making little pulls. Now if you're really confused with this and this pen tool is really driving you crazy, best thing you can do is just kind of click, click, click around it a little bit. It's not my favorite method, and I usually talk trash when people do it. But if you can't figure out these handlebars and it's giving you a big old headache, just kind of click around, trying to get this as close to this chair as possible. Now, if you make a mistake on this, so let's say, for instance, I kind of kinked this one. Oh, crap. Control or Command Z back and try it again. Okay, so anytime you make a mistake, Command or Control Z. Now, I am at the point where I'm going to combine this shape. I'm going to click back on the first anchor point. When I do this, you're going to notice everything in this background goes away. Okay, so when I click, oop, there it goes. And I need to drag out this handlebar. Now, I can click on these individual handlebars and kind of drag things in. If I can get it, this thing's in the way. Drag in individual handlebars so that I can have this a little more iconic than what I had. Now, what I have here is a hole in my video. I can see just what's inside this circle. So as you see, if I move this around, I can see the video is still there, but the only thing I can see is what's inside of it here around this chair. Okay? Now, this is going to be my top layer, so I need to move this up to V3. This will get it up out of the way. And I'm going to go back to my icons here, and I'm going to drag a couple of these videos over to kind of give me things underneath. Let's start with this clip. This is Dan fighting 021. He's facing to the left here, so I'm going to try to put him in this area over here. Okay, and we're going to use a different type of mask for him. So I'm going to put him here. You see he covers a lot of area. I want to go ahead and cut any extra footage off the end because I don't need any of that extra. So I can see right here that it looks a little odd in this location, right? The goal here is to make it look like he's naturally fitting on this side. So first, make sure you have that Dan fighting clip selected. And I'm going to start in motion, and I'm going to change the position of him. Okay, I'm going to click and drag him to the right so he's over here. Now, when I play, it looks a little better in that location, right? But I have this kind of hard cutoff, and if I'm paying attention, if I'm looking, I can see these lines drawing, saying this is the end of the clip. So I need to fix that. On this same clip, making sure you have that same clip selected, go to Opacity and click on this square. This square is going to do something different. It pops up this little square in the middle of your footage. It will always kind of pop in the middle of your footage like this. I'm going to make this square bigger by clicking on these anchor points and just dragging it off the edge of the footage. This side, the left side, I'll make sure I've just got enough of his face to be able to see. Okay. Now, I've got a line set up here and it's a little crooked. I can always click on this line to create another anchor point and drag it wherever I need. Now, in this scenario, every mask comes in has a few options. The path the mask is taking, meaning you can move the mask as things move, but that gets a little complicated and that's a little more advanced than what I'm trying to do right now. Feather and opacity allow for some neat options. Expansion does as well. Feel free to play with those when you want. But for right now, I just want to look at feather. Notice this dashed line on both sides of the blue mask. Okay? If I push up the feather on this, you see this dashed line kind of get a little bit more extreme on all sides. Feathering is fading. Okay? So this mask is going to fade from here to there, from one dashed line to the next. Now, when I hit play on this, you shouldn't notice such a hard line because it should fade from one to the next. Okay? Let's try this again. I'm going to use this eye. No, not that one. That one. I'm going to grab Dan Fighting 18, and I'm going to put that underneath as well. So this is going to be on my V1 layer. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut off any extra that I don't need from this clip. And I see again, he's in the middle. That's not what I want. Make sure you have the right clip selected in the timeline. If you don't have the right thing selected in the timeline, you're going to end up with a bunch of weird stuff happening. Okay? So make sure you have that 18 video. I'm going to drag him to the left like this. And because he's underneath this guy's mask, he's going to fade naturally anyway. So just by moving him over without putting a mask on, I get a nice little effect here. And it's pretty seamless. If I take Dan out of this completely, I can see everything's kind of blending real nicely between these two clips. So again, it's all about kind of playing with these different masks. Okay? So let's go a little further down the timeline, and I'm going to get this ultra aggressive. No, that's probably not going to work. Let's go for Dan Fighting 22. And I'm going to put him further down the timeline. Remember, you can hit minus and plus on your keyboard to kind of move things around a little bit. You can also drag this icon. That'll allow it to get a little bigger and smaller. Alright, so I'm going to shorten this. I only need about 5 seconds a clip to be happy with this. I don't even need that much, to be honest with you. So just kind of keep it simple. Let's look at what you can do with that mask, specifically with that pen tool. Okay? So with that clip selected, I'm going to grab my pen tool and I'm going to click to make any type of shape. I don't care what shape you make. You can do the starburst look that I'm doing. You can do whatever you'd like. Okay? Make a shape. Well, that went ugly fast. Alright, I'm going to put that shape on his face here. Now when I hit play, I see he moves a bit. Alright, so I want to move this mask with him. That's going to be the trick. I'm going to start right at the beginning here of the clip. And I'm going to click on mask path. I'm going to toggle the animation, hit that little stopwatch to start this animation. Now, as I see him move over and to the right, I can stop right here, and I can click on that mask right here, and I can move it. And when I do that, notice it gives me a new keyframe. So now, that mask moves between spots. There are options here to track select forward, meaning that it will attempt to guess. So when I hit play, it'll guess at the motion you're looking for it to take, and it'll try to match. Now, it will make 8 million anchor points between the two. But you see, it moves pretty well with the figure that we've set up. So this is great. If I'm sitting here slowly moving around, it'll read those motions and those lines around me. Now, if I make a quick punch, it may not read that very well. Okay, so quick movements, it's not going to read. Slow movements, fairly well. Now you can always go frame by frame and move this frame by frame, clicking these little icons and making your own keyframes. But you don't have to, alright? So these are good ways to kind of play around with what a mask can do. So now, let's look at some different examples of how we can do this. So that clip from the beginning of me, if I look, I've got a video of me sitting here talking, and then I've got a separate video of me popping my head in and talking. If I turn the visibility off on the me sitting here layer, you can see what that first video looks like. Notice how I'm trying to keep myself out of my other shot, okay? It's not always easy to do that. But if I go back and look at the visibility of the other layer, I can see that I'm basically sitting here talking to myself, right? It's about timing out that conversation, right? So these are little touches that you can go a long way with. Let's check another example here, okay? Yeah, that's it. So, two basic masks that you'll see all over the place. You'll see the fade out as somebody walks past something. So if you've been at South Central before, you know that there's a bar right here in the corners around my room. Watch what happens when I come out of the room, go past that bar, I just disappear. It's a simple mask. Notice nothing's changing on the right hand side. People are still walking down the hall like normal, right? That's because, again, I'm dealing with two separate videos. I've got the one video of me walking. I've got the separate video of the hall by itself without me in it. Okay? Now, the ghost effect, the fade out, right? Simple. You see me coming here walking. Ooh, I got my video layer cut off. My bad. So you'll see me come out walking here, and then I'll just fade out like a ghost. Right? Again, two simple effects. It's about having the video the exact same in both and just fading out from one to the next. Okay? It's not complicated. It just takes some thought. That's the key to this whole thing, is just being able to think about it while you're filming. Okay? It is a challenge. Don't get me wrong. Now, if you've got this, what I want to see is this setup right here. I want to see these different versions of a mask set up. This fading between the two Dans with a blending mode. These two Dans in the background with young Dan above, and this moving mask. Okay? I need an MP4. So again, File, Export, Media. Make sure you're naming things correctly. I'm noticing a lot of that not happening. Click on your output name first. Name it. Place it in a place where you know where it is. Make sure you are putting the entire sequence in the source range and then exporting. H.264 is an MP4. That's what I prefer to see. Alright, now if you've got that, turn that into today's assignment, and we'll see you in the next one.